This is a story from when I was 14 years old. During winter break, I had the chance to visit my uncle's vacation lodge in N Prefecture. He was only in his 30s at the time, still quite young for an uncle. Originally, he had planned to go there with his girlfriend, but since they had recently broken up, he ended up inviting me instead. We had always been close ever since I was a child, so I was truly happy to join him on the trip. My uncle lived in the same city as me. Early in the morning, he came by car to pick me up at my house, and from there, we set off together on the road. My uncle was a stylish man. For as long as I could remember, he had introduced me to all sorts of things, different games and pastimes, outdoor activities, music, and much more. I looked up to him and admired him deeply. The drive itself was long, about 8 hours one way, but it never felt dull. We spent the time talking, listening to music, stopping here and there for breaks, and even taking small detours. It was, in every sense, an enjoyable journey. Eventually, we reached the area near our destination. We stopped at a supermarket to buy ingredients for dinner. Then we drove up a long, winding mountain road to the lodge. It wasn't very large, but it had the atmosphere of a stylish wooden hideaway. From the slightly lower slope, we could see 2 or 3 other vacation homes. They looked empty, with no one visiting. For dinner, we had a barbecue in the garden. The meat was nothing fancy, just inexpensive cuts. But cooked over charcoal, it tasted delicious. We grilled offal, seafood, and vegetables as well, and ate until we were full. We even cooked white rice in a mess tin over the fire, making it a truly perfect meal. Afterward, we moved into the room with a fireplace. We watched TV, played PlayStation, Super Famicom, and even old Famicom games. He even showed me some underground adult videos. At the time, I was still a virgin, so it left quite a shock on me. As midnight passed, we began sharing scary stories. My uncle was especially good at telling them, and it was truly frightening. If there's a chance someday, I would like to write down those stories as well. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, my uncle muttered, "Never go into the back mountain." He explained that even the local people almost never went there, though, apparently, matsutake mushrooms could sometimes be found there. Note, matsutake are prized wild mushrooms in Japan. He also mentioned, though it might not be related, that a company president who owned a nearby vacation home had once said he saw a man hanging himself in that back mountain. Hearing that, I thought, there's no way I would ever go in there after hearing something so creepy. And with that, we kept playing and talking until about 5 in the morning. Finally, we each went to sleep at last. Sunlight streaming into the room woke me up. The time was already past noon. Feeling thirsty, I went downstairs to drink some water. On the way, I peeked into my uncle's room. He was still fast asleep, snoring loudly. The air was cold, yet it was such a refreshing and pleasant morning. The mountain air truly felt different from the city. Back in my own room, I stepped out onto the balcony and sat in a chair. The view faced directly toward the back mountain. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than an ordinary mountain. Then, I suddenly remembered that there was a telescope in the room. Wanting to take a closer look at the natural scenery, I carried the telescope out onto the balcony. It was a high-quality, expensive model. Even distant scenery appeared beautifully clear through its lens. I could see the town far away, and birds perched on trees in the surrounding mountains. I was deeply impressed, gazing through it for perhaps 30 minutes without pause. Just then, as I happened to be looking into the trees of the back mountain, something moving entered my field of vision. It looked like a person. I could see the back. The head was smooth and bald. The whole body kept trembling as it swayed. A ritual dance. It held a sickle in one hand. But what was strange was that, despite it being the middle of winter, it was completely naked. A festival. But there was only one person. My thoughts scattered, and 1,000 questions ran through my head. Because its back faced toward me, I couldn't see the face. Watching that movement somehow reminded me of Budo. Budo is a Japanese avant-garde dance, known for its slow, distorted, and eerie movements. Do not look any longer. A primal feeling warned me not to keep watching. It must be human, I told myself, just an odd person, an unsettling person. Yet my curiosity won out. I cranked the telescope's zoom to the maximum. The smooth back of the skull came into sharp focus. Its skin was pale white. A chill ran down my spine. At that instant, as it danced and swayed, it slowly turned around. It seemed to have a face that could pass for human. There was a nose and a mouth, but there were no eyebrows. Instead, a single eye sat in the center of the brow, oriented vertically. My body trembled. One eye, a grotesque, dangerous deformity. Through the telescope's lens, its eye met mine. Its mouth twisted into a smile. Ooh-ah! The moment our eyes met, I screamed. Tears would not stop. A crushing despair swept over me. It was as if everything inside me had given up. I staggered in hysteria, running about the room. Just then, my uncle burst into the room. What happened? My uncle shouted. A monster. Huh. The telescope. The back mountain. My uncle rushed to the telescope and peered through it. Bird. He let out a wordless groan, clutching his head in both hands. Tears streamed down his face as snot dripped from his nose. Compared to a few moments earlier, I had regained a bit of composure. I demanded, "What the hell is that thing?" My uncle wailed, crying out the name of his ex-girlfriend. For privacy, let's call her A. He sobbed over and over. It was terrifying to see him like this. Thinking he had completely lost it, I slapped him across the face with all my strength. The first time in my life I had ever struck someone. He trembled, his body shaking in small spasms for 10, 20 seconds. Finally, he looked straight at me. "Jashi," he said. "Jashi. Listen carefully. In the desk drawer of my room, there are sunglasses. Bring them here. One for me and one for you." "Why? Just do it." I did as I was told and handed my uncle the sunglasses. With trembling hands, he put them on and peered through the telescope. For a while, he slowly moved the telescope, tracking something. He groaned, "Ugh," and beckoned me closer. "Put on the sunglasses and take a look." Nervously, I slipped the glasses on and looked. Through the tinted lenses, the figure was blurred, but still, its single eye met mine from among the trees. A wave of indescribable unease washed over me once again. Yet it wasn't as unbearable as before. Still, my heart was pounding abnormally fast, and the creature was no longer in the same place. Swaying in that strange, distorted dance, it was moving. Its gaze never left me, fixed on me the entire time. It was descending the mountain, coming this way. "Hey, B, do you need to pee?" my uncle asked suddenly. "Huh, at a time like this, what are you?" "If you do, there's an empty plastic bottle in the dining room. Pee into it." Saying this, my uncle went downstairs. I was left dumbfounded, thinking there was no way I could go at a time like this. A few minutes later, he came back, holding a plastic bottle filled with yellow urine. "If you feel the need later, use this one," he said, and handed me another empty bottle. "What is that thing?" I demanded. "It's something of the mountain, a mountain child. Maybe I don't know." My uncle replied, "When I was a kid, my father and I often went camping in the mountains. Not that back mountain of ours, though. Mountains are strange places. Even at night, you sometimes hear people talking outside the tent. But when you check, there's no one there. At times like that, if we sprinkled pee around, the voices would strangely stop dead." He peered through the telescope again, groaning in pain. Ugh. Yet he kept watching the thing. That thing. I don't know how fast it moves in kilometers per hour, but it's crawling along so slowly. Sometimes it disappears from view, but without a doubt, it's moving toward this lodge, he said. "Then let's get out of here, drive away now." I urged. "It's probably useless," he answered. "Unless we can divert its interest away from us, it will probably follow us everywhere. This is a kind of curse. It's an evil gaze, what we call Jashi. The one you were talking about earlier? But how do you know so much about it?" I asked. "My job kept me in a certain northern European city for a while," he said. "I'll tell you the story if we get out of this alive." "If we get out alive, you mean we're staying here until it comes?" I asked, horrified. "No," he said. "We're going to stand and fight." I thought we should definitely stay inside, but my uncle insisted we needed to do something before it reached the lodge. I felt it would be far safer to run away than to face such a terrifying thing. Still, my uncle had always been someone I could rely on. I respected him, so I decided to follow his lead. We each grabbed sunglasses, a plastic bottle, a small backpack with light rations, our handheld binoculars, a wooden bat, flashlights, and so on. His idea was to deal with it before darkness fell. Could I stand that gaze up close? Not just through a telescope, or even with sunglasses on. Could I face it that near? A flood of doubts and anxieties ran through my head. The back mountain was actually quite vast. We used binoculars, sweeping the slopes to search for the thing. According to my uncle, it was probably moving with us as its target, so eventually we'd run into it. We didn't want to go too deep and get caught by nightfall, so we moved about 500 meters from the lodge and waited in a somewhat open spot. "Anything that distracts its interest will do," he said. "Just its interest." "How do you plan to do that?" I asked. "In my idea, we have to get close to it at some point. But never look straight at it. Glance sideways, you understand? Keep it at the edge of your vision and track its position there. Then, splash the pee we saved on it. If that still fails," he trailed off, then added, "if that still doesn't work, we might have to perform an indecent display." "What?" I said, stunned. "Jashi hates impurity," he explained. "It recoils from filth, excrement, urine, and even indecent displays. It won't necessarily kill it, but if that drives it away, we might be saved. And if even that doesn't work, I asked, then we'll have no choice but to run, get to the car, and go. My uncle and I sat on the rock, frozen with a nameless fear and dread. We took turns scanning the slope with the binoculars. The time had passed 4 o'clock. "Big bro, wake up." I heard the voice of my little brother, the one who died in an accident when I was 10. "Big bro, wake up. You'll be late for school." "Shut up. Give me 3 more minutes," I thought, half asleep. "Big bro, if you don't wake up, you'll die." I snapped awake. Had I been sleeping? In that state of terror and tension, how could I? Had I been drugged? I glanced at my uncle beside me. He was asleep. I shook him awake. He sprang up. He checked his wristwatch, 5:30. Dusk was already settling into near darkness. Cold sweat ran down my back. "B, can you hear that?" my uncle asked. "Huh," I replied, disoriented. "A voice to song," he said. I strained my ears. From a thicket a few meters to our right front, a voice began to float out. It moved closer and closer. The melody was like a folk song, unintelligible words, but a high, eerie tone. The sound itself made my head spin with terror. Just hearing that voice made the whole world feel unbearable. "Okay, shine the light at its feet," my uncle shouted. I aimed my flashlight at the lower part of the bushes, where it seemed to be coming from. I saw feet, hairless, unnaturally white. The body writhed and contorted as it drew closer. The song, how horribly eerie it was. For an instant, my thoughts cut out completely. "Ah! Eek!" The thing dropped its hips and dropped to all fours. It brought its face into the beam of the flashlight aimed at its feet. I ended up looking straight at it. The same feeling I had felt earlier washed over me again. A crushing despair swept over me. It was as if everything inside me had given up. I thought I could just bite my tongue and end it. Anything to stop seeing that face. My uncle overturned the plastic bottle and began to sob uncontrollably. The fallen flashlight now cast a wash of light over the creature's body. It sang some incomprehensible, loathsome song as it crawled forward on all fours. Its movement was awkward and newborn foal-like, coming closer and closer. A rusty sickle glinted in its right hand. For a moment I seriously considered biting my tongue to end it all. Then, my uncle's phone started ringing. BRRR. He had been weeping, but suddenly went blank, reached into his down pocket, and looked at the screen. In the dim light, I couldn't understand why. Why he was checking his phone now, when we were about to die. The ringtone kept buzzing. He stared at the phone as the thing crawled toward me. I was so terrified I wet myself. I thought this was the end. At that instant, my uncle let out an incredible roar. He snatched the fallen flashlight from the ground and lunged back to my side, grabbing my bottle. "Don't look this way. I'll shine the light on it. Close your eyes," he shouted. I spun on the ground in a panic, my sunglasses slipping, pressed my head, and shut my eyes tightly. This part is what my uncle told me afterward. First, he kept the beam on the thing's face and tracked its position from the corner of his eye. Then, in a grim, desperate move, he put the bottle to his lips, drew some of the urine into his mouth, and, while keeping the flashlight trained on the creature's face, he crouched and spat a fine mist toward it. He said he timed it so that I would have my eyes closed at that instant. He blew it like a spray. A high, horse-like shriek burst from the creature. He repeated it, spit spray, again and again, aimed directly at its eye. Its scream rose to an even higher, more terrible pitch. But the thing did not immediately flee. Fearing the worst, my uncle then resorted to an indecent display. He exposed himself in a shocking, humiliating way, an act meant to shame and repel it. Whether it was the sight or some other reaction, the creature let out a stream of bitter, curse-like sounds I could not understand. Then, with a single turn of its back, it began to retreat. I slowly opened my eyes and looked up. My uncle's flashlight stayed trained on the creature's back. Even as it withdrew, it kept singing that dreadful song, twisting and writhing as it moved. It retreated at a painfully slow pace, so slow it was like watching an elderly person with a cane walk away. We held the beam on its back and watched, terrified it might suddenly turn and look at us again. Time stretched on like an eternity. Every second burned into our minds with fear. Finally, after what felt endless, its shape vanished into the darkness. We walked back to the lodge in silence, not exchanging a single word. Once inside, my uncle went around checking every door to make sure they were locked. He made coffee, sipped it, and finally spoke. Did that do it? Did we manage to divert its interest? I asked quietly. Probably, he said, with a thin, wry smile. My manhood had shriveled up miserably, though, he added, forcing a bitter chuckle. He grinned ruefully for a moment. Then, in soft, halting sentences, he began to tell me about Jashi, the evil gaze, and what he had learned of it over the years. My uncle often traveled overseas by ship for work. I can't say much about his job, but he was basically a technical specialist. One day, while he was staying in a certain northern European city, a colleague he'd become friendly with, someone who could also act as an interpreter, told him he wanted to show him something interesting. The colleague led my uncle down a quiet back alley. At first, my uncle thought it might be some sort of strip joint or similar place. Instead, they were ushered into a small, grimy house tucked away in the alley. From the outside it looked shabby, but once inside, it was a different world. There were rugs that screamed luxury at a glance, pottery, and precious metal ornaments. A pleasant fragrance of incense drifted through the rooms. Wondering what was going on, my uncle was led into a small inner room. By candlelight sat a man who looked to be about in his 60s. The strange thing was that, even though it was night and they were indoors, the man wore sunglasses. The local man whispered to my uncle that this man had a dangerous power, something they called Jashi. Jashi, the evil gaze, commonly known as the evil eye, is a folk belief found across many cultures. In many languages and traditions it goes by different names, but the core idea is the same. A malicious glare can bring a curse down on its target. The basic effect is that someone struck by the evil eye may fall ill, weaken over time, or in extreme tales even die. My uncle listened half in jest at first, thinking the man might be some sort of trickster or stage practitioner. Then the seated man leaned forward and whispered to the interpreter. The interpreter told my uncle he seemed skeptical, so the man offered to let him experience a small portion of the power. Thinking it would be a curiosity and a bit of fun, my uncle agreed. The man whispered again to the interpreter and said, "I will bind you now. Please do not misunderstand. My power is strong. You will struggle. I will only, for a single instant, look into your eyes. That is all you must endure." My uncle thought the man must have some frightening trick around his eyes. Maybe his eyes were actually ruined, or perhaps he used colored contact lenses. Or maybe the incense had some hallucinogenic effect. Though he was reluctant to be tied up, my uncle trusted the local colleague, so he agreed. They tied my uncle to a chair, and the man approached while the colleague turned his back. Quietly, the man removed his sunglasses and looked down at my uncle. He said it was exactly like the thing you saw today. My uncle muttered, placing his coffee on the table. "The instant you look, you feel like you want to die." The eyes themselves look ordinary enough, but everything in the world becomes unbearable. It was only for a second or two, but it's enough. The colleague told my uncle that the man with the evil eye would even kill for the right price. He was used by local gangs in their fights, the colleague said. About a week before my uncle returned home, the man with the evil eye had died, they said. Apparently, he had been eliminated for betraying his organization. They found him tied to a chair in a brothel dead. The floor had been smeared with feces and urine, the story went. They said the man had torn his bindings with incredible strength and gouged out his own eyes before he died. As I said, the evil eye recoils from impurity. Filth, being covered in filth while being shown strip shows or even sexual acts might do it. He said dryly. I had no strength left to speak, so I just listened. So that creature might have been a carrier of the evil eye, I wondered. As if he had read my thoughts, my uncle continued. I don't know whether it was truly a monster or a human raised in that way, but somehow I felt we couldn't just run and hide forever, so I resolved to stand and fight with everything I had. You know how they say Kappas hate human spit? Maybe, strangely, a living human body can be more effective against those things than sutras or talismans. As I listened, I thought of my little brother's dream and said so out loud. Maybe my brother had helped us, I said, and I began to cry. My uncle listened solemnly, silent for about a minute, then spoke again. Maybe that's possible. Your brother was steadier than you were. Do you remember my phone? The call that came earlier? That was from my ex, say. He gave a small, embarrassed laugh and added, but there's no way a phone would work up here in these mountains. Look, there isn't even a single bar on the signal, is there? So who knows? Maybe there are things that work beyond simple explanation. Let's head down the mountain and go home right now. I'm selling this lodge anyway. I want to call her back as soon as we can. He finished his coffee, stood up, and managed a shy smile.